From my audio interface going out to my friend letting me borrow his vintage Neumann KM84 microphones, it's got me really thinking about the impact that nice, expensive gear has in the production process. We're going to be talking about that, as well as looking at a Gypsy Jazz dramedy cue on my week 49 vlog check-in. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining me for week 49 of my 52 cues, where I am committing to writing at least one cue per week for the entire year, coming onto YouTube, talking about it, doing a breakdown of the cue, and then also talking about things that are going on in the industry, in my career, or just general brain ramblings. This cue that we're listening to right now is called Mischievous Achiever, which is a Gypsy Jazz flavored dramedy cue. Before we get started, I want to give a special word of thanks to my Patreon patrons whose support keeps this channel going. If that's something you're interested in hearing more about, we'll talk more about it at the end of the video. But I do thank you for joining me and thank you for finding me here on YouTube. However you found me, it is much appreciated. So we're going to be talking about gear. If you want to skip over the vlog portion and get straight to the cue breakdown, you can check out the timestamps in the description below. But I want to talk about gear, specifically on the impact that nice gear has in the production music process. And there are a few things that have happened recently that have really got this going in my brain. The first is a few weeks ago, my audio interface going out. I've been using a Scarlett 18i8 since I really got serious about production. And before then, it was like a Behringer mixer through USB, and I wasn't ready for prime time. But when I first dove into it, I got the Focusrite Scarlett 18i8, which served me faithfully for nearly 8 years, I guess it would be. And I got it when I got my computer set up, and when I got everything all together, I knew I wanted to really kind of jump in, be able to do multi-track recording. And, if when you start researching things like audio interfaces, it's super easy to get mega overwhelmed because there are so many options out there. And the price goes up exponentially very quickly, especially in the audio interface market. But I was really balancing, the number of inputs that I needed, a good quality piece of kit that wasn't gonna crap out, ironically. Even though I've heard that 8 years is a really good run for something like the Scarlett. This isn't an RME interface. It's not a universal audio. It's not an Apollo. These are super high-end pieces of equipment. And so I got the 18i8. 4 inputs, tons of outputs. I can throw an ADAT on it if I wanted to expand. And it served me very, very well. And when it crapped out, I immediately thought about replacing it with another 18i8. But I thought, hey, maybe this is an opportunity to maybe upgrade. And especially knowing that I had a Gen 1 18i8, and they're 2 generations. They're on Generation 3 now. And the ports have changed. It's now USB-C and Thunderbolt. And so, yeah, I thought I would upgrade. And so I got into the headspace of researching more audio interfaces. And I got as confused as I was 8 years ago when I first dove in. The first thing I did was I asked some of my colleagues at Full Sail who are exceptionally knowledgeable about this. And I got some really good advice. Everything from, getting a single like Apollo twin interface or an Apollo interface with just 2 inputs, and then running an ADAT, microphone preamp where I could load as many channels digitally as I wanted to. But that got super overwhelming, and that got really expensive really fast. And then I looked at the big brother to the Scarlett which is the Focusrite 18i20, which is a rack unit, which gives me more inputs, and then the big brother to that, which is the Claret, and it got really overwhelming. Now, I ended up going with the Scarlett 18i20 because the number of inputs that I have 8 microphone inputs. I knew I was going to be doing some drum set multi-track recording, and for the price point, around $550 or so, by the time I got it, you know, on a discount and everything, it really couldn't be beat. But as I was researching and digging into the YouTube videos and the comparisons, and I was listening, and I could tell an audible difference. But in many of the examples, I don't want to say many, in several of the examples I saw, you know, these interfaces were being compared in studio environments using really nice microphones and all of that. And so I came to the conclusion that my signal chain and the lower quality of the 18i20 would not be as significantly an issue because of the room I'm in and the quality of microphones that I'm using. So I went with the 18i20. And I don't have any regrets. Yes, there are nicer interfaces, but the features mattered more to me. Having the number of inputs, the bang for the buck, if you will, was more important to me. So that got me then into borrowing my friend's vintage KM84 microphones. And I'm really glad I didn't actually look these mics up ahead of time because I've since, as I was prepping for today's vlog, I've since gone on like eBay and reverb.com and researched how rare these are and how expensive these mics are. They're vintage. They don't make these anymore. I think they now make the KM 184s or the 84, but Neumann makes new ones, but these are vintage from my friend who is German, bought them in Germany and brought them over when he moved to the States. And I've seen them go from $2,000 each to $13,000 for a pair. And I'm really glad I didn't know that. Not that I didn't treat them nicely. I definitely took care of them while they were here. Sadly, I don't have them anymore. But I would have been a whole heck of a lot nervous if I was, you know, carrying around $13,000 worth of microphones just like in my backpack. That would have made me really, really mega nervous. But using those microphones, they sounded amazing, and I had to do very little work to make them sound great. But are they like 13 times better than, no, 130 times better than my Samson CO2 microphones that I've been recording on for several years, which were $100 for a pair? Do they sound better? Unequivocally, yes. Yes, they do. Do they sound 130 times better? Well, that's kind of up to you. And that's when I started changing the way I thought about what nice gear is really looking to accomplish. Getting a super nice audio interface, getting really nice microphones, buying a really nice ukulele. You know, I started my ukulele journey with a $40 Amazon ukulele. I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it, and I've sold several cues, 3 albums worth of cues on that $40 ukulele. I have no regrets, but I knew that I wanted to upgrade my ukulele experience and actually bought not even a super nice one, but a $500 Martin ukulele, which sounds amazing. But again, does it sound, 50 times better? Or math, 10 times better? Maybe, maybe not. Especially for what we're doing. I'm not a ukulele artist. I'm not going to go sell ukulele records. I'm not going to go on tour with my ukulele. I'm not going to perform live. I'm not looking for ukulele solos. It doesn't mean I won't down the road. But right now I'm not. But what that nice ukulele does, and what the nice microphones did, and what I imagine a nicer audio interface would do, would be to make the production process easier. And I was having a conversation just yesterday with a composer friend of mine talking about this very subject, because I recorded, before I gave him away, I recorded a little flute lick as I'm working on a new cue. I recorded a little flute lick and did a side-by-side comparison, and I just wanted to look at the waveform. I just wanted to look at the spectral analysis. And I want to show it to you, because I was really surprised between the Neumanns, the $13,000 Neumanns, and my $100 Samsons. Now, before I show you, this is not an audio comparison. YouTube has some amazing comparisons of different microphones that will do an eternally better job than I am. And this is how it sounds on guitar. This is how it sounds on drum. I didn't think to do overhead drum comparisons. I think that would have been really, really good to hear. But I think the spectral analysis is worth looking at. All right, so this is the Neumann, and here is the lick, just so you can kind of hear it really quick. It's just a little flute lick. That's all it is. Now, if I play the Samson CO2s and look at those and listen to them, compared again to the 184s, to the Samsons, 184s, or the 84s. Do the 84s sound better? Yes. 130 times better? I think that's arguable. But where it really, really matters is, like, if I look at the waveform, you can see how much less noise there is and how much more faithful the waveform kind of looks. All right, so there are the 84s. I feel like there's a lot more density, there's a lot more detail in, especially like right around in here. Right, this area here, especially, you can really see it. Versus there. 84s. And so I feel like there's more detail up in here. But more importantly than that is the level of noise. The level of just noise floor that exists in the microphone that I can clean up. I can take a little sample here, do a spectral denoise, take this, render it, and I can get a signal which looks pretty darn close to that guy. Arguably a cleaner sound. Versus this. All right, so this is the Neumann non-cleanup. Here is now the Samsons cleaned up. And now things get interesting. Again, still more detail in the Neumanns, but the Samsons, having gone through and done some cleanup, are much more quickly approaching what the Neumanns sound like. Now, if I was a recording artist, this is a non-question. But as a production music composer who's balancing working in a home studio versus, paying the bills, still having a day job, all of those things. And I don't think I can drop 13 grand on some vintage Neumanns. I would have trouble justifying dropping 2 grand on some new ones. But here's what gave me pause and has sent my brain into a loop of really chewing on this, which prompted today's topic. As production music composers, we are looking, and our goal is to create hundreds and hundreds of cues. And because of that, we're always looking for time savers, ways that we can produce faster. And yes, I can take my spectral repair tool and clean up every single recording that these Samson CO2s make. And that is absolutely what I do. I repair each audio file. It's automatic now. But if I'm spending, let's say, 5 minutes, let's say 5 minutes per cue in cleanup of the microphones, multiply that times hundreds of cues. My goal is 1,000 cues. And by the end of my career, could easily be 2,000 and 3,000 cues. And each one of those cues, I spend an extra 5 minutes. Now that's 15,000 minutes spent in cleaning up. Translate that to hours, translate that to the time spent and the cost per hour of cleaning those up. And suddenly, the math starts to balance out a little bit. Because if I can bring a microphone that saves me 5 minutes per cue, if I can bring an audio interface that saves me another 10 minutes per cue, if I can bring a ukulele that will save me 30 minutes worth of tracking time because it just plays so nicely that I don't have to overcome the limitations of a cheap instrument, either as a performer or in post-production with EQing and trying to sweeten it up and make it sound great. Then does that become worth it? And we're not even talking about, it starts with the cue to begin with. Right? You can't just buy a nice piece of equipment if you don't have the cue to back it up. If you don't have the work or the skill, the talent, the artistry, whatever. You can give a $200 saxophone, or a trumpet to Wynton Marsalis, and he's still going to sound like Wynton Marsalis. But if you give a $10,000 saxophone to a 6th grade trumpet player, they're not going to sound like Wynton Marsalis. And that's not going to sound like a $10,000 trumpet. So we're not even talking necessarily about that. We're looking at time saving. And that is what's making me rethink some things. And maybe I don't know. Am I ever going to buy $13,000 microphones? Probably not. Could I pull the trigger on updating my Samson CO2s to maybe some warm audio mics? Something in the middle? That's what I feel like I got with my Scarlett. It's not like a super cheap interface. I think it is the best bang for your buck, and it's that kind of middle of the road. It's not just, nameless, kind of faceless Amazon cheap thing. But it's why I upgraded my ukulele. I can see myself upgrading my microphones. I can see myself down the road updating my audio interface and going into the big kids territory, and starting to sit at the grown-up table. But for right now, I'm still kind of at the kids' table in terms of gear, but I'm getting there. But what do you think? What are your thoughts? Have you invested heavily into some really nice, expensive gear, and has that paid off for you? Did you have your own existential crisis about pulling the trigger, or maybe it was just like having to explain it to your significant other on, hey, honey, I just spent $1,000 on microphones, and here's why. Which I have a deal with Shannon, my wife, and the deal is that she's cool with me buying whatever gear, whatever little toys I want for the studio, as long as it pays for itself. If I can write a cue, if I can use it to help sell cues, then she's on board with that. But I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to know if you took the deep dive on a nice piece of kit, and did that improve the quality of your work? All right, so with that, let's take a look at Mischievous Achiever, a cue that I wrote during a recent music production live stream, which is a benefit for my Patreon patrons. And this does feature me on drum set, just like last week's cue, with those sweet, buttery smooth, amazing. I didn't even have to go in, and I don't think I did any cleanup on them. The Neumann vintage KM84 $13,000 microphones hanging over my drum set on my cheap little my cheap microphone stand. I get nervous just thinking about it. We're going to take a listen to it, and then we'll break it down on the other side. So that was Mischievous Achiever. A quick correction. This actually doesn't feature those Neumann microphones. I recorded these. I recorded this snare drum. It's just me playing brushes using my Samson CO2 microphones right here at the desk because yeah, that was during the live stream, and I recorded it just the snare drum, which meant that I did go in and clean that up, and you can see that how kind of clean that area is, and yeah, maybe one of these vlogs I should talk about my my cleanup process, and if that's something you're interested in, let me know. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see me using Isotope RX. I'm not an expert at any stretch of the imagination, but it does go a long way to helping like mouth clicks if you're doing like voiceover dialogue stuff, and anyway, and room tone, that kind of thing. So we start off, yeah, I'll just kind of start off with the snare drum. Just me playing brushes on my snare drum. This is a Mapex Pro M snare drum, 13-inch snare using Aquarian Modern Vintage heads. I love the Aquarian Modern Vintage for jazz drums. They have the tone, the quality of like calfskin heads, but they hold up much better than Remo fiber skins and much better than the Evans 56s. I love the Evans 56s. Those are my favorite sound, but man, those bubble and shred like crazy. So the Aquarian Modern Vintage, it's not like, sorry, pardon me while we have drumhead talk. So for you drummers out there, this is for you. If you're not a drummer, then you can kind of skip over the next 30 seconds or so. But you know, with FiberSkin and the Remo FiberSkin and the Evans 56, it's actually kind of like this papery ply that goes on top of the Mylar, and it feels, it sounds really, really authentic as far as being a calfskin head, which is what jazz drummers go for. That mellowness and just kind of the dull thuddiness that calfskin will give you is really intrinsic to the sound of jazz, specifically jazz drums. But that paper coating flakes off really, not flakes, but it wears out super quickly. And I find that they're not worth the effort, the price of keeping up with them. Like I said, the 56s are my favorite sound, but I have found the Aquarian Modern Vintage to be the best of both worlds, because the Modern Vintage is a coating like you would find on traditional standard coated heads, but you get that calfskin vibe, that calfskin sound. And I put the Modern Vintage on specifically Modern Vintage 2 mediums, I put on all of my jazz drums. So that's what's going on here. And I think they sound really good because it's coating. They really grip into brushwork longer than like FiberSkin and those kind of things. The form of this cue is standard kind of blues form. It's not an ABA type of a form. It doesn't have a breakdown in the middle. It's just not that kind of cue. And like when I said on a previous video that like 95, 98% or whatever random percentage I pulled out of my butt at the time, when I said that 95% of my cues adhere to this is one of the 5% that doesn't. And so it's an A form, A with a little intro, make a statement, repeat the statement with more energy, and then with a little tag. So at the energy, when the second A comes in, you can hear the brushwork gets more intense, and I layer in a wood block, going for a soft shoe type of a thing. And the wood block is just this wood block that was actually gifted to me by a friend who's actually one of my podcast hosts, who is now a minister. It's a Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson here in Orlando. And she used to be, she still is a percussionist, but she was a percussion major, and I think she has her master's in conducting and all this kind of stuff. And so she gave this to me, this fantastic wood block, and it sounds really, really good. As far as processing, I've got EQs, a little light compression. I put compression on all of my recorded audio. I did put an enveloper tool on the snare drum just to kind of, so it's not super, like the release transients aren't super swimmy. So that just kind of tightens it up just a little bit. I did put another EQ on just to contain that area, and using the fab filter on that. Little light compression. I did send both of these to my parallel compression bus, which is simply the one knob pressure. Again, love the one knob series. No, I don't overthink my parallel compression. I just need a little extra beef, and that really helps with that. Starting at the top then, if we go up to my main melody, which is my melodica, which is just a Hohner melodica I bought off of Amazon, with compression, and you'll notice a pitch correction because it's a little pitchy. Without it, it's just a little bright. You can see it's pulling it flat. So I put a pitch correction on there just to gently ease it back. Not like a not like a Cher, T-Pain kind of way, but just to pull it back. But then I doubled my pitch, my melodica with a separate performance that I then upped the octave. And so you can increase the octave here. So this is the regular. Transpose that up the octave. And note that I did not put a pitch correction on this. And what this is doing is creating a nice detuned chorus effect, and then an octave below it. Put all three of those together and you get it almost sounds like an accordion. Now I wanted to back up to the snare drum a little bit. And, oh, not snare drum. No, I got ahead of myself. I'm going to be talking about next the ukulele. Now, this is my Martin ukulele. EQ'd really kind of bright with the ozone exciter, a little bit of tape saturation. I almost wanted to go for kind of a guitar vibe on this. And you'll notice that I have a sample delay, even though I recorded it using my stereo pair. It is a stereo recording. But I threw the sample delay in. And the reason I do that is because on my stereo pair, which just is my CO2s that just stay stuck to my desk, I have them set in an XY pattern because I don't want to like break out my ruler and start measuring mic placements. I barely have my brain around like phase and getting myself into trouble recording guitars. So I record them in XY, and if I really want that nice wide stereo sound, I will take my XY recording and then do a sample delay on top of that, which will go from kind of a nice centered recording. And if I were to look at my, let me actually pull up my multimeter. Here we go. And look at the goniometer, which is Logic's kind of stereo. Right? You can see it's not like mono, right? Mono would look like that. Actually, it look more like this. So it's not mono. I did push it a little bit to the left here, but when I turn on the stereo sample delay, it gives me a much rounder, more wider sound. And so that's one way that I can take a stereo XY signal and get a wider. It's not like using the sample delay to kind of create the Haas effect, which you could take a mono signal and then make it kind of fake stereo. This is me widening the stereo. All right, and so then I layered in ukulele when I brought in my second A, and this is one of my cheap Amazon ukuleles that I've strung with a low G string. So, you know, on a ukulele, it's usually bum, 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 bum. So that top note is actually higher. But this is that instead of being bum, bum, it's bum, 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 bum. Anyway, I'm going to stop singing. But it's a low G string instead of a high G string. And it gives kind of a meatier, beefier sound. And that is sample delayed to the right. So my top uke is sample delay to the left, and my bottom uke here, my low G uke, is sample delay to the right. So here it is. Nice wide sound, top uke to the left, bottom uke to the right. Okay. Let's get into some of my bass work here. I have my Symphobia, and side note, did I have the right uke? Yeah, I did. Side note, they're about to update Symphobia to version 2.0. That's going to be a tectonic shift in how this plugin works and how this library works, and I am here for that. I'm sure you will hear me talk all about it. So that's the bass line pizzicatos doubled up with the BBCSO. Oh. Come on. All right, with some of the microphones changed up a little bit. The close mics, tree mics, and the close wideband mics, just to it's a little bit too wide. I don't want it to sound like it's necessarily on a concert stage, and I don't want it to be too big. And this is the bass leader, so it's single. Now, what I wasn't getting was like a really nice fat low end out of this, and this is really tough to coax a really thick subby low end out of upright bass. So I layered in the orchestral sub, and I've talked about that here on the channel before. The orchestral sub is simply a sampler instrument with nothing loaded, and that will default to a sine wave. And this gives me that super subby low end. Don't really want to hear it, you just want to feel it. So without it, you miss it. But when it's there, you really, really feel it. At the halfway point, I bring in a tuba, which is the BBCSO tuba. And I bring pizzicato strings on the offbeats. Just going up the chords, just going up the by thirds. And it plays off of the uke. Along with the melodica. Put it all together. Go into the last 5 chord. 4. 5. 4, a little tag, and then we end with our little button. Right, so that is how that cue is all put together. So that is Mischievous Achiever, and those are my thoughts on microphones and expensive gear. And like I said, I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed what I do here, thank you, but don't thank me, thank my Patreon patrons whose support helps keep this channel going. If that's something that you are interested in, to be a patron, it's only $1 a month, and you also get access to my weekly music production live streams, of which this was written. New Blank DAW, started going for it. So if that's something you're interested in, there's information in the description below. But that's going to do it for me. There is a thread over at 52cues.com talking about what's next, and I'll have more thoughts on that as we round up the last 3 weeks of the year. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have an amazing week 50, and until next time, peace.